Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam wa rasulillah. Stories and metaphors are more powerful than just words. You know, one of my early business mentors, whenever he would be in a conversation, whether it be with his other business partners or I would ask him a question, he would right away tell a story about it. He would say, I remember I was doing this. And a quick short story. Or he would need to explain a point, he would tell a story. Stories are more powerful, it has more impact in people than actual your words. That's why they say in an interview, the person asks you, so what interests you about our company? Instead of saying, well, I'm interested in because the company has good location, because the company has a good mission. Those are words. Instead you tell a story. You say, I was in the field for the last 5 years and I remember one time I was given this project, and you connect that with your current interview. So metaphors and stories are very powerful. Use people's stories, use people's metaphors. Oftentimes in therapy or in personal development coaching, people tell me, how are you doing? I'm just hanging there. I see you're hanging. That's pretty dangerous. You're just hanging there. Why don't you climb up? And even that little small change in what I just said has a huge impact in people. So I could easily tell people, you sound like you're hanging, meaning you must be a little anxious, or you're going through something in your life and you're not too convinced, or I could say all that. Instead, all of that did, I said, you're hanging? That's kind of dangerous. Why don't you climb up? And people go, oh, that's funny, And another person, I was talking to him, and a friend of mine, he tell me, I'm going through so much, life is throwing me curveballs one after another. I can't take it anymore. I said, life is throwing you a curveball? He said, yeah, man, I'm tired of this. I keep one problem, and then another problem, then another problem. I said, if life throws you a curveball, take a bat and swing it, make it a home run. And he laughed and he giggled. That little shift has a huge impact. And so, being able to use metaphors, being able to use words, stories, has a huge impact. Even in the Quran, Allah teaches lessons through parables. In the Quran, Allah teaches lessons through stories of different prophets. Because the stories are way more powerful. Think about kids, right? Kids, what they do is, in kindergarten, in first grade, second grade, they read stories. And the stories teach them morals. Stories are powerful. So if you want to make a point, you're arguing with someone and you're trying to make a case, instead of you trying to make an argument, what you want to do is you want to tell a story about it. Make a metaphor, make an analogy. I was trying to help one of my friend, and he's telling me, I feel like my life keep going back and forth. I'm tired of it, back and forth. I could have told him, brother, keep going. I said, you should keep on striving, don't give up. I could have said all that. Instead what I said? I said, in winter, he's like, what? I'm like, in winter, your car gets stuck in the snow. He's like, yeah. I said, well, what do? You keep on pushing the car, right? Up and down, up and down. And eventually what happens? It gets out the snow, gets unstuck. I said, maybe in your life, you're just going up and down, and you're going to be unstuck very soon. So in your conversation, use more stories. Look, you all have stories. Not just the storytellers on YouTube or storytellers, in math radio. We all have stories that you can tell. So learn to tell those stories and use metaphors. So people using metaphor all the time. I was working with one of my patients in therapy, and she was 65-year-old. She's going through issues in her life. She went through traumatic past in her childhood, and she went through a lot of pain, and she's going through depression. And one day she was telling me, as I was listening to her, and I'm looking for those metaphors, I'm looking for those stories, and she was telling me, she said, I'm in the word she used was, she's like a cloth that's so pure, and she was born pure, but then she was stained, and she's a white cloth that's been stained, and it can never go back to being white again. And I stopped for a moment. I said, what if you used a Clorox? What if you used bleach? And she started laughing. At all this point she was just depressed and she was crying. And when I said that to her in a nice, in a genuine way, not to be facetious, and she cracked up and she smiled. She said, well, she said, I said, what would happen if you bleach it? It would become white again, right? He said, no, you can never get that color, and it would have some mark. I said, you're right. If you take that stain and your white cloth and you put bleach on it, at least it'll be wearable. So what I'm telling her, see, that's all I made. That's the only point I made. See, what I was getting to her was that, yes, you went through trauma, you went through pain in your life, you have been scarred for life. But if you take that bleach and you at least cleaned it, you can at least move forward. You can at least live. So stories and metaphors are so powerful. In our brain, stories and metaphors have a bigger impact than just words. Because when you have stories, you have to visualize. Now you're using more senses. So when I'm talking to someone and I'm telling them a story instead of telling them a point, I'm actually helping them visualize in their mind. Or I'm using a metaphor and I'm changing the metaphor inside their mind. That actually keeps creating a deeper impact. I have sometimes teenagers that come in my office, and I tell them a story. I said, a lot of time people come here and first day they're sitting there, they don't want to talk. They're like, why am I here? My parents brought me here. Instead of telling them, no, you should be here, it will help you out, I'm here to help, all that good stuff. Instead I say, you know what, I work with, he said, I tell them, I work with a lot of young people. And usually they come to my office, and first day they're usually, they don't feel as open, but eventually they love coming here. And they come here, they start to have changes, and I tell them a story about them. And that has a powerful impact in them. And you have no idea how many times people, live up to their expectation. The stories that I tell them. Even kids, in the stories that they read in the childhood, some say that people live those stories as an adult. So in your childhood, if you read stories, about adventure, you tend to live a life of adventure. One person, he was saying that when a child, he read a story about grapes, and this little scary story about how the grapes turn into a monster or whatnot. And he said, in adulthood, he actually was afraid of eating grapes, or he felt like he had allergy to them. He didn't realize a lot later that in his childhood, he read some book and that got him scared about eating grapes. Because stories and metaphors have a powerful impact in your psychology. So what I'm telling you is that in your new conversation, at home, at work, at school, learn to see what the story people are telling you. People are always telling you different metaphors. If you really listen closely to people when you listen to them, you will see that they're using some kind of analogy, some kind of stories. And you could use that to your advantage. You could use that to help them. You could use that to explain to them. Use the same analogy and use it with them. And stories. So when you're to make a point, that's how kids, we teach them morals through stories. And so when you want to tell someone something, share a story. I'm trying to make a point to my friend, I say, no, I remember, and you mention somebody. That story will have much more impact. Because when people listen to a story, their guards are down, their defenses are down, and they'll actually hear you out. So if you want to convince your mother, you convince your wife, convince your husband about something, tell a story about it. And say, I remember a friend, he was doing that. And so when you use stories, when you use metaphors, you become much more powerful as a listener, as a speaker. And so find the opportunities, and you all have stories. Don't feel like you don't have stories. You all went through experiences. Just find those, write them down, and use them in a way so you can explain your points. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.